Welcome to the Tenet Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson, here with my friend, partner, and two-time hot dog world champion, co-host extraordinaire, Wes Brown.
Oh my God. I'm still trying to get over the eighth wonder of the world from last week. So boy, that put a lot of pressure on me. God, what a beautiful day. Huh? What?
People are Googling right now.
They are. Wes Brown, eighth wonder of the world.
Hot dog eating champion?
Hot dog eating champion. Oh my God. What a great day. I've been up since 4. That was awesome. But I sat down and reread this book or reread parts of the book. So I'm ready to roll for today. It's a great read. So I'm looking forward. Our listeners will have a great day and they'll take away a lot of good stuff. So this will be fun.
I concur.
Hey, Todd, tell us about our media sponsor.
I would be happy to, Wes. We want to take a moment and acknowledge our media sponsor, New Magazine. That's NUE. New recently put out the winter issue of New Denver, and you can find the link to the issue on the Tenet Facebook page, along with the link to their new 2021 arts issue. Or if you're on Instagram, you can follow the new national edition at new_magazine and the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. New Denver is putting on Weekend of the Arts. This event will be happening the evening of Friday, April 23rd through Sunday, the 25th at the historic Zhang building on Platt Street here in Denver, and will be home to New Space Pop-Up Gallery. So they're going to have art. I believe there's going to be some music. I think they're inviting some restaurants, but as we get more details, we will share that with you on the podcast and on our Tenet Facebook page. So look for that. All right. Our guest this week is Michael Ardelean, a former pro BMX biker. He's worked in a variety of roles in the apparel and fashion industry, had a VP role at Alternative Apparel, managed a design studio for a number of years, and worked as a consultant helping creative freelancers, and today runs his own recruiting firm called Intro. Michael has written a fantastic new book published by Holloway entitled Art for Money, Up Your Freelance Game and Get Paid What You're Worth. Michael, how are you?
Very good. Thank you, Todd. I'm just here in LA where the rent is cheap and the palm trees grow. Did I get it right?
So that's some kind.
The rent is low. The
rent is low and the palm trees grow. Yeah. LA's fine most of the time. The sun shines. If anybody does not know what we're talking about Neil Diamond's song, I Am I Said. So love it. Love LA. Every time somebody says that they live in LA, that song pops in my head. That's why we digressed. Sorry, Todd.
Maybe you should sing the song so that people have a reference.
Oh, well, maybe next time. We'll put it as a special singing episode. We'll release it on a Tuesday or something.
Karaoke with Wes Brown.
Oh, my God.
Before we get into discussing this amazing book that Michael's written, Art for Money, Michael, I'd like to talk to you about your background leading up to where you are with your firm Intro. You were born and raised in Michigan, correct?
Correct.
In the Detroit area, and you got your start in BMX. You were a sponsored pro BMX rider. Yeah,
that's right. That's what brought me to California, pretty much. It was actually the first true interest that I had as a kid. I was 10 or 11 years old. And, when I was bored, I'd walk to the store and look at magazines. And I found a BMX magazine, and it was these cool looking guys wearing cool clothes, at least to me at the time. Los Angeles, usually California backdrop. And I said, that's what I'm going to be. And that's what I'm going to do.
So that was the start of the ride.
Exactly.
No pun intended. I guess that was.
There we go.
How long were you a pro rider?
It was about 10 years. I think it was like age 19 to 29 or something like that. So it was about 10 years.
You had sponsorship. How many sponsors did you have?
Too many to count, but usually it would be something like 5 or 6 at a time. You'd have your bike sponsor, your bike parts, your shoes, your clothes, and I don't know, maybe a helmet or after a while, there was definitely, toward the end of my career, there was definitely a phase where you had to have your energy drink sponsor would usually be your highest paying sponsor, but I never had one.
Interesting.
I was a little before that time.
Yeah.
So having these sponsorships and building these relationships and being an influencer, I imagine that kind of gave you really insight into the whole business world and merchandising and the inner workings.
That's true. And I wasn't thinking of it that way at the time. At the time, I was thinking of it as just a really enjoyable way to make a living and hang out with my friends, and subconsciously had some guilt associated with that. Like, man, there's some sort of urgency around moving on from that into a real job, when all of my friends around me were just thinking, how can I continue not having a job and riding bikes? And for me, it was like I had kind of started to glamorize in my mind this idea of having a real job. But yes, you're right. I mean, having these sponsors and riding bikes and getting involved in every aspect of that completely turned me on to product and marketing, mostly product. So I started actually, but the first freelancing I did was alongside riding. Actually, towards the end of my career, I would do the little things like I would be a team manager for a shoe company that was getting into the BMX world and needed to know like who the coolest riders were. They were usually my friends. And so I'd pull a team together for them. I'd do things like that. I have 3 or 4 of these freelance gigs on the side. And eventually I bugged my sponsor, Giant Bicycle, until they gave me a job as a product manager. And so that was my start in the corporate world.
How long did it take you bugging them before they relented and gave you a job?
Well, the most effective way to bug them was to just do the work, whether they were paying me or not. Just say, like, identify the thing that needed to get done and start doing it and show them that I could do it. And after a while, they brought me on. I guess it was probably 6 months to a year of talking about it. And pretty soon I had a desk in the office, and I went from riding my bike most of the day or whenever I felt like it to waking up in the morning really early and going to the office and riding my bike on my lunch break.
Was that kind of a conscious thought about, okay, here's my way in and I'm going to think about what problems need to be solved and I'm going to solve them? Was that conscious, or is it just kind of something that happened?
Just kind of something that happened, to be honest with you. But in retrospect, the best advice I could give anyone would be consciously do those things. Right. I probably wasn't smart enough at the time to consciously do those things. I might have been able to do a little more of it, but yeah, good question.
It sounded like, even though this wasn't necessarily a conscious effort, but you already like had this vision of where you could take this thing that they didn't necessarily have because of your unique insight into that world. Is that correct?
Sort of. I saw things not getting done that I wanted to see get done. And to the extent that I could, I just started doing them. And the rest, of course, I needed to learn. And so that was the other part of it. Like getting that job was like, I thought I knew how a certain product should look or be shaped. And I definitely knew how it should perform, but I had never been to a factory in China. I never learned how to use a spreadsheet. So those were all, that was my crash course. I only worked there 1 year, but that job was like my crash course in Excel formulas and visiting factories and doing product development and communicating back and forth with vendors and making sure margins existed, stuff like that.
Wow. That's cool though. That shows somewhat of your creative mind, and the fact that you, and maybe like you said, consciously didn't see it, but you've kind of filled or forced yourself into this little gap there that needed to be filled. And I think that's just part of the creative mind working.
Yeah. And like this desire to feel useful, I think.
Yeah.
Which is like a desire I still have right now, like a really good day at work when I'm like really high off of something great that happened. It's just when I boil that feeling down, it's just, wow, I feel really useful today.
At the end of the day, that's the feeling that you want to have and that you like. You're addicted to it,
so.
Right?
I guess so. Yeah. Like I made a difference.
This transition, and you were thinking about having a real job. I imagine as a BMX rider, you have a very small window as far as your career is concerned. And at some point, you know that you're going to leave. So was that conscious effort or unconscious effort in some ways to kind of negotiate those waters and transition into something that was more of a permanent thing?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I reached a point where I had a very it showed me the world, like Asia, Europe, 49 of 50 states. I got an education in kind of social behavior and navigating relationships and meeting new people in new countries, like stuff that was really scary to me at first, growing up in a maybe a little bit of a sheltered environment. So it did that for me, and I really appreciated that. And I also was able to build a really amazing social circle, even outside of BMX, because then you go to the X Games, and then you have exposure to skateboarding and skateboarders and making friends in the industry. But I would say, in addition to what you said, the other thing that was nagging me was this feeling that, I had cut my education short to come west. The moment I got my first paying sponsor in BMX, I was like, okay, I'm going to California. And I did that. And I kind of left everything. I left some things undone in terms of education and learning and experience in the workforce. I was in my late 20s, early 30s before I was really functioning in a corporate job. So I had to get up to speed really quickly on those things. And yeah, to your point, yeah, I really felt like I had to, my window of time was going to run out. And I was fortunate that I had all my physical health still, because I had friends who had terrible accidents in BMX. And I was like, well, maybe I just kind of excuse myself right now while I'm still in one piece and learn something else that I could use for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Education is great, but it sounds like trial by fire, and having that real world experience was incredibly valuable. And in some ways, probably more beneficial than if you just gone to, traditional college and earned a business degree. Not that that's not important too, but you have real world experience and were able to leverage that into the next position that you got yourself into, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And if I really look back and assess it, it's like every career step was it started with an opportunity that was given to me that I felt like I didn't deserve. After that came this feeling of obligation to whoever gave me that opportunity to get up to speed quickly and learn by doing, and learn 10 times faster than the people who are around me. But I agree with you. I did some guest lecturing at design school recently, and it really struck me how talented designers who have learned how to design maybe haven't learned the real world experience of everything else that it takes to be successful in the world as a designer, such as, looking people in the eye and being able to stand up in front of people and talk, being able to present and sell your ideas, being able to do a job interview. So that would kind of form the thesis really for the book, not to get ahead of ourselves, but yeah, this idea that talent's only a small part of the whole picture.
Yeah.
You can be Eddie Van Halen, the next Eddie Van Halen, in your basement, your parents' basement, and can shred like no tomorrow. But if you're not out there doing the things that it takes to become Eddie Van Halen, it doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that, and I'm not a musician, so I'll make all the wrong analogies here, but I'm sure there's complications that arise with performing on one stage and then performing on a different one, and then equipment, and then the relationships you have to have and make. And yeah, I mean, oversimplifying a bit, it was just like being really nice to people for 20 years was also a big part of a lot of the opportunities that arose.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. Like being a good person, being a nice person. I think that's essential. I find that in my own life. I know that Wes has found that with doing sales. It does count for a lot, being respectful, being courteous, and those things that you just said, as far as looking people in the eye and being the real deal, and then living up to that image is really essential.
Yeah. And those were things that were really scary for me, because I grew up in what I felt like I was just inherently shy. And so meeting new people, I remember a moment when I got this opportunity to fly to Australia by myself to meet somebody that I'd never met and get taken on like a 2-week tour doing bike riding demos. And I was scared to death to do that. I hadn't been on a plane since I could remember. My last flight was when I was like 1.5 years old. And so I was scared to death to do it, but I also knew that it was the way to step into this life that I wanted. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And yeah, I had to face all these things like relationships, people skills. It's not all, it's very gratifying for me now because it's probably deep seated. I had a deep seated desire to make friends and be social, but it was very difficult. It didn't come easy. So I was forced to learn it.
I read that you consider yourself pretty shy and introverted, and that now you look at that as, obviously as you do it more, it gets easier, but it's actually kind of a mindset you kind of have to get yourself into. And it's a challenge, right? You sound like somebody, especially with obviously your BMX career, you like a challenge.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like I spent a lot of years avoiding challenges. And I think I learned that life's hard no matter what. So life can be hard because you're trying to make it easy, or life can be hard because you're embracing challenges and facing them directly. One of those scenarios turned out way better than the other, but I don't think there's any way to avoid difficulties in life.
Yeah.
You sound like somebody from the get-go that really takes initiative. Like you see an opportunity or you want something and you just kind of go for it, even if there's that fear factor, which a lot of creatives, I think, and freelancers have.
Yeah. Wow. That's really, you keep giving me compliments and I don't know if, and I have to think, am I really that? That's, I would love to think of myself as that. Yeah. And I think there's a component of that, but there's also, I just remember like being, someone would see a picture of me being 8 feet in the air above an 8-foot ramp on my bike. And they'd say, how did you ever get the guts to do that? That's crazy. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't think of myself as a crazy person at all. And then I have to explain to them, no, like I didn't just see an 8-foot ramp and pedal as fast as I could towards it and fly into the air and see what would happen. I actually, like, you didn't see the 2 years that it took for me to look like an idiot going halfway up the ramp, going 4 feet up and turning around until, eventually I was 1 inch over the top and then, an inch a day, that kind of mentality. It was never that scary because I was incrementally making progress. But I do think that once you have a little win in life, like a small win, you can start to snowball that. I don't consider myself someone who has the mental and emotional control over myself that I can just put on confidence. I have to kind of slowly earn and learn confidence, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's true with most people too. I think there's some people that are just bold enough to just barrel through it. But I think most people, if kind of approach things haphazard or a little shy, a little gun shy, and they just keep working. And once you kind of get comfortable and have some mistakes and correct them, then you, like you said, you get some wind in your sail, and it's easier to start tacking down even further. So that's great.
Yeah, so true. I agree with you. And I think like what I try to be really conscious of when I wrote the book is because there's a million entrepreneur influencers out there who are telling you, bet on yourself, get the investor, go create $1 billion company. And, maybe if you looked at the demographic of people who would read my book, a good portion of them are probably capable of doing that, but they're not just going to go do that necessarily. They're first going to have to like feel what it feels like to be a successful team of one who has 3 or 4 clients, who's getting paid what they deserve. And then that can be snowballed into something bigger if they want to. Otherwise they could, there's no shame in just being that team of one forever, if you like.
Right.
Yeah. It's all part of the journey, and it's incremental. Like you're discussing with your, your experience as a BMX pro, and you build on that and you learn from what people would consider failures, but I don't look at it as a mistake or a failure. It's really an experience and a way to educate yourself. So it's a constant education.
Very true. Like, I remember because when I was growing up in Michigan, it wasn't cool to be a BMX rider. Like if someone saw you riding BMX or trying to jump down some stairs or whatever we were doing and fall, they would stop and like laugh at you. Like, haha, that guy just fell off his bike. What they didn't realize is for us, falling off the bike was something that happened, 10, 20 times a day. you weren't successful as a BMX rider because you figured out how not to fall. It was the opposite. It was like you got really good at falling. But of course, to do that, you have to not be too worried about what everyone thinks of you.
Right. And I think what's kind of cool about nowadays, as opposed to like when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and the failure was really a negative thing. And I think the youth today can really grab the bull by the horns, because we're teaching them fail fast, and, fail often, because you're going to get better because you're failures. And it's better to learn from these failures early on and fail early, but, don't be afraid of, falling on your face. So I think the younger generations today have a really good positive outlook on failing to success, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. It goes back to the earlier point about just real world experience. And real world experience is hard because you're failing a lot, but it's really productive because you're kind of condensing a whole bunch of learning into a short period. I think that becomes more and more important as we move into the future. I made a comment in the book about God bless your grandparents for working the exact same job for 50 years and then retiring. My grandpa did. He worked at Ford as a pattern maker at Ford Motor Company, and then retired from that job. I'm sure that he worked really hard to learn how to do what he did. But once he was in that position, he just felt secure in it and felt stable in it and just stuck with it. And I don't know if we really have those luxuries nowadays, but I think it's a good thing, because it's exciting to kind of every couple of years be reinventing yourself and constantly being in a state of learning. Obviously, you guys know that's what keeps us all from getting old.
Right.
Yeah, good point. I mean, in the new modern age with the gig economy, being malleable and reinventing yourself every so often, I think, is essential.
Yeah, it used to be something some people did, and now it's becoming something everyone has to do.
Yeah.
So you're this influencer, and you convinced Giant to take you on as a product manager, and you kind of spoke about some of the things that you got to do for them. Then you transition into apparel and fashion. How did that all come about?
At some point during my bike riding career, I started to romanticize this idea of fashion being much cooler than BMX. And so when I got the opportunity to move in that direction, I took it. And so the first apparel brand I worked for was Quicksilver. After that was Perry Ellis, and then it was Alternative Apparel, like you mentioned. But once a company is of a certain size, there's this department called merchandising that kind of exists between design and sales. And the job of the merchant is to be the hub of the wheel from an operational standpoint within the company, but also be the person. And many brands, I would say, are merchant led, in that like the merchant's there to give parameters to the designer and to satisfy the sales. So you're living in the present, or maybe even a little bit of the past, with the sales team. And then you're living in the future with the design team. And you're also being this diplomat where you're like, okay, you're both right. Here's how we're going to get to the right product assortment for our customer and then make it financially viable. And so that was the job that I had to learn. And then I spent about a decade at varying levels of leadership.
And each one of those times, did you seek out those positions, or were you approached by those people from those companies to be a part of this?
The first one was I got to make a friend who I always really enjoyed punching above my weight class in terms of the friend groups that I would try to curate for myself. And I made a friend when I lived across town from here in Venice Beach, who was the SVP of merchandising and design at Quicksilver at the time. And so he pulled some strings that allowed me to interview for an assistant merchandising role. And I got that job. And I knew that I got that job because he helped me get it. So that was kind of that obligation that I felt to get really, really good at this job. I can't make this guy look bad. One reason I was excited about merchandising at that point was because I always romanticized design, but I wasn't a trained designer. So what I thought merchandising was an opportunity to exist close to design without having been trained as a designer. But what I then went on to learn was that it's complicated and difficult, and it's all those things I just described to you. But of course, it was too late. I was already in the position, so I had to learn it. And so I did.
So lots of moving parts and a lot of multitasking, I imagine.
Yeah, because in addition to design and sales, you're also a conduit to the marketing team and also to the product creation components of design. So like the technical designers, the pattern makers, the developers, and the production team and the sourcing team. So all of these people, you got 6 or 7 different department heads or department people that you're dealing with every day. And it's kind of your job to keep everyone marching the same direction, make sure the product comes in at a quality level that design is happy with, and a margin level that you're happy with, and a cost level that the sourcing team's happy with, and a price point that the sales team's happy with. And so, yes, it's herding cats, really.
Wow. And almost an impossible job because, each one of them kind of conflicts with the other to a certain degree. So you're really, yeah. So it's got to be a huge challenge and rewarding at the end when the product is launched and like everybody's rolling.
Yeah, you're right. It's like a job that you're constantly getting wrong and refining the process of. Merchandising is where I first learned the Pareto principle, like the 80-20 rule. And so you're kind of revisiting that rule every time you revisit, you do a hindsight meeting with sales and you look at how the previous collection performed. And so then you're like, okay, Pareto principle is alive and well here. 20% of our products created 80% of our revenue. So how can we trim the long tail while still making sure that we have some more directional product that is more exciting? And we know we're not going to make a lot of money on that, but we can't just make the volume drivers every day. And so, yeah, it's a sorting and mixing and curating and having a financial responsibility, but also thinking about like, what can you do to make sure the brand is still relevant years from now?
Yeah. And that principle is dead accurate. Doing sales, I did some sales analysis of my clients, and it wasn't exactly 80-20%, but it was pretty darn close. It was like 17% of my clients brought in 80% of my revenue. And so then if you want to increase your sales, a lot of times you should go after your 20% biggest clients, and that'll increase your revenue more quickly than trying to go out and cold call a bunch of new ones.
Absolutely. When I was, I got to spend some time as a managing partner in a design studio, and I learned that really quickly. It is cheaper and more effective and more lucrative to do a really great job for your existing clients so that they become repeat clients and they tell other people about you than it is to go try to get a whole bunch of new clients.
Yeah.
And that applies at a different scales, but like it applies at a very small scale for freelancers too. I mean, and a creative freelancer, depending on what your art is that you do, you might only need 3 to 5 clients in a year. So don't overwhelm yourself by trying to market yourself to the whole world. Just go be like, famous to the family, like Seth Godin talks about. Just, have a couple true fans and followers.
Yeah.
True clients.
Yeah. And if you need income, let's say you're an artist, you need income quickly. Maybe your, sales are lagging a little. You should go after your collectors. That should be your first move, So
people who have already engaged with you,
people that already buy your product and believe in you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always found that to be true.
Yeah.
So from this experience that you had working in the apparel and fashion industry, where do you go from there?
So I was laid off from my job in 2015. And I told myself, I think what a lot of people tell themselves, which is I'll do a little consulting work until the next big job comes along. And I think in retrospect, what I was saying to myself was, I'd really love it if I could just be a consultant, but I don't really believe that that's possible. So I'm going to dabble. I'm going to dabble a little bit until the next full-time opportunity presents itself. And what ended up happening is after the next year following being laid off ended up being the best year financially of my life to date, just as a consultant. And so, of course, as soon as I had my, 3-4 steady clients as a consultant, I was like, okay, I'm never going back to the I'm never going back to being an employee. I would say overall, my firm now places talent as freelance talent or, in full-time roles. And I truly believe in the value and the importance of both. But what I learned is on the freelance side, when you experience this version of like these first steps into entrepreneurship and really understanding how to present yourself and just provide value that's far beyond what people are paying you. Those are values that, understanding how to manage up, understanding how to communicate, collaborate. Those are all values that employers like in their employees too. So I try to make it a point to say in the book that this is for employees as well, but I also really want to write, I want the next book to be the employee version. I want to write like the career advancement, the short, really short manual, the employee version of this book.
That would be cool. And I can so relate to what you're talking about because I've done strategic planning for nonprofits for a number of years. And when I got laid off from the nonprofit that I was employed from, I dabbled in some freelance work and some consulting work and doing roundtables and some strategic plans. But I floundered because I was so fearful, and I jumped into the next opportunity that paid me a salary or a check, I should say. There's a part of me that I wish I would have just went full bore, but I just had a fear to launch. Probably even to this day, still don't know how to like take it from concept and then having the faith to move forward and just jumping into it. I'm looking at the deep end of the pool and like, oh my God, I'm scared to jump. I might drown, so. Yeah.
I was having a conversation with my wife about this last night about this fear that we all have. And, I could get preachy and talk about how people are fearful to be entrepreneurs, but I have the same fears. And I think everyone does. I was telling her the story about in my executive recruiting firm, I was working on a particular opportunity that was really huge for a really well-funded company who was looking for a very specific talent. And a particular candidate was one person removed from me. She was a friend of a friend. And so I called my friend and I said, hey, would you be comfortable introducing me to this person? Because she would be perfect for this gigantic opportunity that I'm working on. And he went and talked to her and he came back to me and he's like, you know what? She thanks you for thinking of her, but her job just set her up with a new promotion and a new office. And she just bought a condo. And he told me the number of the salary that they're paying her. And I said, great. I'm so happy for her, but literally we could double or triple that number. And also, this is not a commitment if she talks to me. If she talks to me, she makes a new friend, and then maybe there's an opportunity down the line. But she was so fearful to jeopardize this new situation that she was in that she wouldn't even dare to let herself think about a better situation. And it was easy for me to judge that person at first until I realized, I have done the exact same thing. We have a certain human, I guess, desire to grow and advance, but only a certain amount, because if we think too big, it could get really scary.
That's like a primitive thing, I think, that's embedded in our DNA, don't you think? Like that thing that keeps you from doing things that are incredibly like out there or fearful.
Mm-hmm.
It's that response, that thing that kind of kicks in and says, okay, I'm not really sure that I should do that. Like I'm already comfortable and I feel good about what I'm doing, but this is maybe a little bit too outside of the scope of who I am or what I think I can do.
Yeah. And fear exists at every level, right? Like I'm at a point with my business where, we're a team of 4, which is bigger from a revenue standpoint, an employee standpoint, bigger than I ever thought I would be. But, I have friends who are peers who are probably the same amount of intelligent as I am, who have, $100 million companies with investors and everything else. And it's just a different level of risk. I could say to myself, you know what? I only want a nice, tidy, high EBITDA business of 10 employees. But when I get there, I might say, oh man, what if I just had 20 employees? And everyone thinks at a different level. But I was talking to a friend the other day. He's a CEO. He hires a lot of freelancers. And he was telling me, you wouldn't believe how fearful some of these freelancers are. They're even afraid to create a website of a portfolio website of their own work. And so I think there is this fear of just putting yourself out there, this fear that you might present yourself in a way that isn't premium or isn't, that everyone doesn't love, and you might look silly. But I think a lot of the fear also boils down to financial and even like personal finance. When your paycheck is steady, it's very easy to calculate what you need to put away for retirement, what you need to have in the cash emergency fund, what's coming in every month. It's very easy to do that. You could switch to a freelance career where you made the exact same amount of money, but in a different cadence. And all of a sudden that becomes, now you need twice as much maybe in your emergency fund, or you need to take other precautions to make so you can sleep at night. And so that's the third book I want to write, the personal finance version of all of this, because I do think that I had a really interesting personal finance journey myself, coming from like a ton of consumer debt back in the day and having to overcome that. And best thing I ever did, once I did that, when I arrived at a point where I got married, moved into our new apartment, and our net worth was zero, but we had no debt. And I felt like the richest person in the world. Like, long story short, freelancers might have a different level of confidence if they had a different approach to personal finance too. So that'd be an interesting topic to tackle.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that's so important. It's something that I'm trying to instill in my children right now, is that carrying debt is essentially enslavement to the system, and the system is set up for you to fail. I have a friend that worked as a bankruptcy trustee, and he's like, these credit cards, they're just set up to have, the average consumer fail. That's what they want. That's what they want to have happen. They want to milk you for every single penny that they can get out of you, and then you're done, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I'm trying to teach my children. Like, hey, if you don't carry debt, sometimes it's essential to have some debt depending on what your situation is. But for the most part, being debt-free is freedom. And just like what you explained, as far as, even though, you didn't have any money in the bank, you didn't have any debt. So you felt like you're on top of the world, right? That's that's a sense of freedom and a freeing situation. It enables you to take chances and do the things that you would like to do without any kind of repercussion. But when you have debt, that could be a tragedy in the making.
Yeah. Yeah. When you have debt, every purchase feels guilty. Every trip or vacation you take feels like maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Maybe you don't enjoy it as much. And, and also just basic math. I mean, there was a point where my minimum payments on credit cards were more than my rent every month, just the minimum payment, just like the interest. So, take that $1,000 or $1,500 or whatever it was, and look at what it could do, mess around with a retirement calculator to see what compounding interest would have done with that $1,500 a month is really eye-opening. And I think for me, that's what made it exciting. Everyone has their own kind of thing that will make that exciting. It has to be exciting to you, or you just won't do it. And so to me, the idea of, passively becoming a millionaire by a certain age by just automating a certain amount of money every month was very exciting, as someone who grew up without a lot of money. So, but everyone has a different motivator. Are your kids old enough to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Yes.
Is that a book that you've read or recommended?
I know of it, but I have not read it myself. And if you suggest it, guess what they're going to get for their birthdays this year?
Yeah.
It's an exciting book. It just kind of tells much along the lines of what you were just saying. Like, your financial enslavement is, it's not like a exceptional thing. It is the absolute norm. It is how everyone is expected to behave. One thing you have to do is, there's probably going to be a short period of having to not, like, there was a point for me where I was making more than enough. I'm a major car enthusiast, right? And so there was a point years back where I was making more than enough money to drive the car that I wanted, but I didn't, because I was dedicated to wiping out my debt first. And so for that 2.5 year period, I had to, and it wasn't just the car, but it was just a lot of lifestyle elements. I had to stop caring what anyone thought about me for that short period. But it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah. And I have a little bit different view of consumer debt. Having some debt is good because obviously that's how you build your credit history and all that. But you do have to manage it really well. There's some people that are like, oh, you shouldn't have any credit cards or you should only have one. And I'm not saying you should go out and open 100 of them. But if you have 5 or 6 credit cards and you're using them periodically, but you're using them, now you can get a credit card where you can write a check to yourself for, let's say, $1,000 and you can pay it off in a year with no interest. If you take advantage of that and just maybe you're doing $300 and then you're just making that payment, as long as you're paying it off at the end of that time, you don't pay any interest. It's where the people get in trouble, is where they allow this high interest rate to kick in and now they owe a bunch of, interest at the end. But, having accessibility to, let's say, $100,000 worth of credit, and then you want to go get a car loan, as long as you don't have a lot of debt to credit ratio, if you have a pretty low debt to credit ratio, it's going to make it a lot easier. But it takes a lot. And I've never been, early on, I wasn't very successful at that, but I've gotten better and better about managing my credit debt. So, and I also, and this is probably a stupid way to think, early on in my life, I thought, I'm going to have a car payment for the rest of my life because I'm going to always, at 4 or 5 years, get a different car. And so I've always had a car payment. And well, that's not true. There was a short period of time where all our cars were paid off. But so I kind of wish I didn't have that thought, but I don't have necessarily the negative thought about credit as long as you're really responsible with it, and that's hard. Yeah. It's hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And I think a lot of people teach, Dave Ramsey is one guy who teaches no debt, no credit cards, whatever. I think he's teaching that not because he necessarily disagrees deep down with what you're saying. I think he's teaching that because it's a simple way to to say one thing to everybody, to say one thing that everyone will understand, and it'll work. It'll be effective if you just follow this simple rule. The more complexity you introduce, the more discipline you have to have and behave, so it does boil down to behavior. Morgan Housel wrote this amazing book, The Psychology of Money, that I read recently. And it's the finance version of the personal finance version of why I really believe that 80% of everything is just behavior. 20% of being a successful freelance creative is talent, and the rest is behavior. And so I can't teach talent, so I wrote a book about behavior.
Nice. Yeah.
And you referenced that particular book, The Psychology of Money, in your book that you just wrote. That's in the resources, correct?
Right. Yeah.
I want to go back to your experience here. You're doing this consulting work. You're having some of the best financial times that you've ever had as far as making money. And then you take on being a manager of a design studio. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you speak to that? Because this plays into some of the stuff in your book as far as like surrounding yourself with people that you enjoy being around, networking, and then getting yourself into possibly a different position, and that you don't need to separate business from friends necessarily, that this can all come, together. And you mentioned it earlier with your earlier experience too, how, you knew people and they helped you get into positions that maybe you weren't necessarily qualified for, but you were given the opportunity, you took it, ran with it, and then proved yourself.
Yeah, 100%. So that, I feel like all of my weird seemingly nonlinear career events, it always had me existing at this intersection between creativity and business. And so I got this opportunity where, when I had moved into a consulting career, one of the consulting jobs I was doing was helping. So I have these two friends who are ex-Nike designers who founded a design studio. And they invited me. They had one client they were working on that required an element of merchandising work that needed to be done. So they brought me in to help on that. We ended up becoming close, and I functioned really well within their their studio. So they ended up making me a partner. And what that boiled down to for me was, again, I get to be with these people that I admire, really talented ex-Nike innovation designers who look at what I do. They were looking at me like, we need you. We need your help. You have this thing that's useful to us, which is like running the business side of their studio. And also if they had a client that they're having difficulty with, or if they didn't necessarily, weren't feeling social that day or whatever, I was like the face of the studio. So I could, because I love that part. I love interfacing with the clients. I love breaking down the calendar and the deliverables and how they were going to get what they were paying for. And then also making sure we got paid. So that was my job for a while. And it was a result of consulting work. I kind of fell into that opportunity.
And a shared interest in, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Cars. The whole cars thing is funny because it's been, I never thought, I guess I mentioned this in the book. I never thought that it would be a means of making new friends and meeting new business partners and those kind of things. But it really was. And it was completely organic because I just have this addiction to cool cars, old cars, European cars, and driving them and, going to the track sometimes or whatever. And so many friendships have been made from that and business opportunities and everything else.
How many cars do you have?
Actually, just 2. What I did was, so we moved into a place that just has a 2-car garage. Right? And I said, okay, for the first time in my life, I'm going to put cars in the garage. And I'm not going to have cars in the street and all that kind of thing. So I had to come up with my 2 cars that I wanted to have. What are the 2 perfect cars? One for my wife and one for me. And so I got to pick whatever car I wanted for me. And then for my wife, she's very aesthetically minded too. There's only 3 cars in the whole world that she would ever allow in the garage. And one of them was a Mercedes wagon, as long as it was black. And so I found a black Mercedes AMG wagon, which is super rare and kind of cool if you're a car guy, because there's 140 of them in the world, but also it's a 550 horsepower, racing engine. So my wife's, our family car, our family wagon is faster than my daily sports car. And so that's kind of funny and ironic.
That's
awesome.
Hilarious. Yeah, I love that. What's her other car? You said there was only a couple that she would allow in her garage.
Vintage Porsche 911, something pre 90s, which I had one of those for 6 years and she liked that. Or a Range Rover Classic, which she loved. We also had one of those that was her daily driver. Or a G-Wagon, but not a new enough G-Wagon to be the Kardashian version of the G-Wagon, but the vintage. She likes everything old. Everything she likes is aesthetically beautiful, but just terrible to live with every day. So, which I really appreciate about her actually. But the wagon was a way for us to kind of move into the modern age, but still have something relatively square, which is her criteria. Nice.
What's your favorite car?
I mean, my tastes have progressed and evolved. I was really into BMWs. I was really into Porsches. I have an Aston Martin right now that I really love, and I've never owned a Ferrari yet. So maybe I'll set a goal.
Ferrari's in your future. I like the Aston Martin. That's got to be fun. It's got to be a fun little car to drive.
It's lots of fun. I came from that Porsche 911, which was more minimal and visceral in some ways and lightweight. And the Aston Martin is more I can do all those things in it. It's loud and it's a manual and it's a sports car. But also, if my wife and I escape to Palm Springs, we can take that car. It's comfortable. The air conditioning works, that kind of thing. Plus, it's just the, if certain British cars are you can buy the dip on them in a way that's very beneficial. At a third of their MSRP.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah, love it.
So you're managing this design firm. You're kind of it sounds like you're almost jack of all trades. You fix problems is what it sounds like. You've become this problem solver, right?
Yeah.
At what point do you decide to transition and start your own firm?
It was an idea that had been in my mind for a while that I'd kind of been slowly moving towards. And it was kind of the result of me having these 4 prior careers, and of course the 4 social networks that came along with those. And I had friends who did executive recruiting for a living, and I was learning about it. And I think there was a certain component of it that absolutely had to be learned, like operational elements of it. But there were these other components of it that I had already, which is like, number one, you have to enjoy meeting and getting to know a lot of people. Clients were pre-existing, I had my all of that career behind me. And so I partnered with a friend who had been doing executive search for 20 years, thinking like, oh, this guy gives me credibility and we can have fun doing this together. And like I had this in my head, like I can't do this without him. I don't have credibility in this space. But what I quickly learned was apply the behaviors that I had previously learned, problems, deliver services efficiently, and make it about the customer. It's not about me. I'm not Mr. Important just because I introduced one VIP to another VIP. I'm just there facilitating and kind of like adopting the right mindset and putting the business together. So very quickly, I realized that it didn't make a lot of sense for me to have a partner in the business, and also that person wanted to go a different direction anyway. So what was originally founded as a partnership about 1 year ago turned into just me and starting to build a team. Now being a team of 4, it's super exciting because my decision making doesn't have to go through layers of debate or anything like that. It's like I'm in charge. So if I think I need to do something, I do it. It moves quickly, and it's essentially a glorified freelance practice. It's me and 3 people and having fun every day. And it's funny because it's like it's a fun job with high stakes. Essentially, we are a go-to for like VIPs to find and hire other VIPs. So we can't screw that up. It can't just be any VIP. Like if a fashion brand needs a new creative director, our job isn't just to find a really good creative director. It's to find an excellent leader, know their strengths and their blind spots, be confident they'll fit well within the organization. So we have to know the organization too. So it's difficult and high stakes, but it's also like we get to make people happy all day long. A lot of times we get called in after another recruiting firm has been unsuccessful for a period, which puts the pressure on us. The patience of the president or CEO might already be worn thin. So we got to move fast. We got to do a great job at this thing that other people couldn't do. But when that happens, our clients are extremely happy. And then also we get to change the life of a really talented creative person by setting them up with a career upgrade, basically.
Yeah.
That's exciting. What I enjoy connecting people with other people. It's one of the things I think I'm really good at. And I love the networking aspect of talking with somebody and they mention a project that they're doing. And I go, do you know so-and-so? Maybe you should talk to so-and-so because they just told me they were working on something, either in the same vein. I love connecting people. What do you love about that connection?
Exactly like you. I love doing that. I love identifying a need, knowing that there's somebody in my head or in my Rolodex or whatever that could help fill that need and make that introduction. And inadvertently, really, the other answer to your question is how did I end up doing this is inadvertently, I was doing it for about 4 years on an unofficial basis. And it was just so gratifying to do that. Because again, that happens and you just feel, one of our clients, professional client now, but 4, 5, 6 years ago, when they were founding their company, they were friends. And one of the people I was able to introduce to them is now their second in command, vice president of product of this company. So to see that was really successful as an introduction and also professionally for both parties, and it's lasting, and he's a big part of their success to this day. That's just really gratifying to do. And so I said, well, let's figure out how to just do this all the time, every day, all day.
Something that you really enjoy doing, connecting people, and then you get paid to do it. So you figured out a way to make money doing it. It doesn't get any better than that, right? Doing something that you love to do and then getting paid to do that.
100%. And just like almost any creative or freelance profession, it's a good amount of that just doing the fun thing that you're really good at. And then of course the rest of it that seals the deal and helps us stand out is we are just operationally super efficient and rigorous. And we bring a lot of structure and process, not too much process, but enough that a client knows that they can just give it to us and we'll get it done, and we'll get it done quickly. And if they don't have an offer letter template, like we've got that. We perform the reference check. We call everyone who didn't get the job personally and dismiss them. You know, like that's a thing I hated about recruiters when I was being recruited, was you just get ghosted. And so yeah, it's been this opportunity for me to take everything that I think Richard Branson has a quote about, like, if you want to start with something you find painful and then go from there. And yeah, I get to do that. I get to go kind of correct. Like, I could sit here and complain about how I didn't like the recruiting process, or I could figure out how to do it better.
Right. And to do what you're doing, you either have a really fat Rolodex or you're out constantly meeting people. So I imagine you're constantly networking and in that envelope, like you kind of said in the book, that you're always working above the level that you're currently at and meeting people at, and I can't remember who said it. Somebody said you're only, and I'm going to misquote it, so bear with me, but you're only as, I hate this term, you're only as good as the 5 people that you have surrounding you. Like if you want to get better at what you do or get to that next level, you better be looking for 5 new people that are at that level to really move up. And maybe you know the term that, or the quote.
Yeah, I think it's called the 5 chimps theory,
okay.
Which is, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Bingo. That's
so true. Like for that reason, we should all be trying to be like the dumbest person in the room as often as possible. But yeah, this vocation for me is like an opportunity, whether I like it or not. Luckily I do, but whether I like it or not, I'm being put in a position to, accumulate friends who, more successful than I.
Yeah. And the other thing I pulled from your book that I thought was interesting is that you said, don't waste your money on networking groups and conferences. Just do it. Once again, in loose terms, I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, my opinion. It's my opinion. I think like networking and that idea of networking just gets overthought too much. It's just like the idea of like, there's this misconception. Okay. Like being a successful freelancer is having talent. It's like the talent, and then it's like popularity or the marketing. So I got to be good at this thing, and then I got everyone needs to know about it. And then really, it's like, no, probably 10 people need to know about it. You can start there. And I think networking is the same way. Just even calling it networking, we are labeling it as something that's kind of undesirable, where it's really just about like learn how to make a friend. Like look at your existing friend group. What do they like about you? Like go be that for more people, and you can do it one at a time.
Yeah.
I want to get to this book. All this experience that you've talked to us about and is a culmination of what you've learned all these years working in these different companies and in different positions. What was the catalyst for you to decide to write a book?
Being at that design studio was a crash course in all the things that can go wrong for a really talented creative person. And it wasn't just the partners in my studio, it was just everyone else. Because at the same time, I was also working on helping other creative freelancers on the business side of their, down to the most basic things like setting your rate. How do I determine my rate? And I was like, well, why don't we just come up with a formula for that? That's really simple. So if you want to refine and adjust it on your own, great. But like, let's have a starting point that everyone can get to, because everyone seems to struggle with this issue. And so after, 3, 4, 5 of those things that I was kind of helping solve for the people that were close to me, I just said, well, I want to write it down. I actually didn't have any plan for the book. I knew I had to get it out of me onto paper, but it sat for almost 2 years after I did that. And then I met the team at Holloway, and they wanted to publish it. And so, and they set me up with an editor, Rachel Jepson, who has been incredible. And she made the book, 200% better by working with me and forcing me to think through this brain dump that I had put on paper and just organize it better.
It's very clear and very concise the way it's written. And I feel like I definitely benefited from reading it. I'm going to continue to keep it as a go-to resource for myself. At the end, you kind of speak to the fact that you kind of say in no uncertain terms, like, hey, I'm not telling you anything as a freelancer that you probably don't already know. But what's nice is that you lay it out. Like everybody kind of senses these things, but they're not necessarily putting these things into practice. And what I love is that it's written in such a concise manner. You can just use it as pretty much a reference guide. Like, okay, what do I need to do for this, for this new client or even existing clients? How do I go about putting together a proposal that makes sense and protects me from getting burned?
Thank you. I mean, advice books should be short, I think. If you want to get advice from someone, a couple stories is cool, but for the most part, I just want the takeaways. Give me the takeaways. And so a lot of the writing process and the editing process was about keeping it as short as possible. There are other books like this that exist in the space. They're just dense and they're full of valuable things, of course, but I think creative people especially might shy away from or be overwhelmed by so much information. And so, yeah, my goal was just to distill it to what are the most important things. Of course, I hope that someone who reads this keeps it around as a guide and goes and reads more elaborate books on the same topic. But this is like maybe the gateway drug.
What I really liked about this book was, and this is going to sound weird, but it's an easy read, and it's basically because what Todd said, it's very concise. So, to sit down and even if you only have a half hour just to knock something out, it's really easy to go through. And like you said, you've stripped away all the denseness from it. So it's really an easy read. So I think anybody can just jump right in and really soak up what you're telling them, the advice you're giving them, so I really appreciated that and really enjoyed it.
Thank you again. I think that was the goal. Just make it as easy as possible. It's kind of like the thing, like we talked a little bit about tools and apps. It's like, or systems. I mean, the best system is the one that you'll actually use. The best book is the one you'll actually read. And so that was the goal.
Yeah, no, I took that out too, because I'm a big process person. I like organization. I've read so many different books on how to be organized. Since I've been doing sales again, this past 3 years, I've revamped my process like 4 times, and I'm back to kind of where I started. And it's just like, it's like, this is easy, something that I can do. The tool is only as good as how willing you are able to use it every day. And so I appreciate that. The other thing I really liked about your book is at the bottom, you gave links, for the PDF version. And I don't know if there's going to be a printed version. We can talk about that. But, there's links that you could go to get more information. And I was clicking on those links. In fact, my browser has a bunch of tabs that are open because I kept linking and then just kind of perusing it a little bit and then going back to the book. And I thought that was just valuable as all get out.
Man, thank you. There is a hard copy of the book. The hard copy, paperback or hardcover, is on Amazon. And we made sure that the links at least are shown there so you can kind of track down what we were linking to. But the biggest thing that I wanted to link to was just these templates for proposals and invoices, but also, even more importantly, the calculator, basically the rate calculator. Years back when I decided to tackle my consumer debt, it was funny. Like it took me 10 years to let that debt pile up to the crushing amount that it was, which was more than my annual salary at the time. And it took me 15 minutes to create the world's simplest spreadsheet, which was my plan of attack for wiping out the debt. And that spreadsheet changed my life. So I thought, well, let me see if I can create a really simple tool that anyone could go into, plug in 3 things, answer 3 questions, and then out comes their rate for their services.
Yeah, and I have your template right here. And like it opened up and I was just like, oh my God, that's so, you fill in the blanks. Some of the questions I think are maybe you have to think about it, or trying to find the data might be a little bit, I won't say difficult, but take a little bit of work. But man, once you plug in the numbers, it gives you a really good basis to start from. And I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that could require some research is understanding the value of, if you're a freelancer who's doing something that you haven't previously done as an employee, then what would that equivalent employee get paid as a salary? Maybe you don't know the perfect answer to that question, but you could plug in a guess and you could start from there. Or like a really good starting point that I like to encourage people to do is just like, well, what's the most money you've ever made in 1 year? You know, take that amount and divide it by 2080. That's a number of business hours in a year. You don't take that number and then quote it as your hourly rate, but you now have a starting point, and then you can build some margin in on top of that. And of course, that idea is based on, we always want to be improving and getting better. Nobody started freelancing so they could make less money.
Right. And what I did when I was leaving one job to the current one I had is I took all my benefits and I went to the HR manager and I said, tell me, everything the company pays for me and what I pay. So like my healthcare, what's the company pay for my healthcare? What's my portion? Retirement, what's their match? And then what's my portion? And then added it to my base salary and what other kind of variables. And I did that same thing. I come from HR from a long time ago and did that whole 2080 thing. And for me to make what I'm making here at the next job, I should be making this, and to move up the ladder. So that's a really basic tool that you can start with that really kind of helps you out.
Yeah, I figured like getting started is the most important thing usually. So this thing gets you started. If you are a straightforward, graphic designer or junior art director or whatever it is that you do, then this thing's pretty much plug and play. If it's not, there are other elements that we talk about that you can kind of think about to affect and refine your pricing. And I think one of the, I think the most important thing is like, whatever you use as your criteria, your price quote for a job should be scientific, and it should be a fact and not a suggestion. And that can be perceived in your tone of voice when you quote your price. People can tell when you're telling the truth. Like this is if I'm a freelancer and my price for something is $5,000, the price is $5,000 not because I made up that number, but because that's the number that clients are already paying me. The rate kind of wrote itself. And if I'm not able to command $5,000 for that, maybe I am overcharging, or maybe I need to dedicate more energy to becoming worth $5,000. And so I just try to put some really like black and white ways to think about money and fees in the book.
I think it works on so many different levels. And again, going back to the whole distilling it down, learning about your work experience, your real life experience, and all the things that you've done, this seems like a very natural extension of who you are. It's very streamlined. It's very efficient. And what it boils down to is these life experiences that culminate in two straightforward things that I think freelancers and creatives really struggle with. One is the organizational part, and the other part is being concise in your communication. And communication like rules the world.
Totally agreed. I think that becomes more and more true again as we move into the future and as certain jobs go away or you get taken over by robots. Like the human element, the communication is more and more important. And then I think what we're all learning is all human beings are creative. And we used to kind of think of creative people as these like a certain subsect and then everyone else, but it seems like as we go along, the kind of jobs where you just clock in and out, those are the ones that are kind of going away first. And so it might be affording us this opportunity to relook at what we're all really good at. I define creativity really loosely in the book, and art especially. I know you guys have a lot of real fine artists and people that you would normally conventionally think of as artists on your show. And I kind of took the liberty of defining it as just anyone who's doing something creatively in business for themselves. I have a friend who creates furniture and pottery, and all of it is Like, I don't think he sat there and said, you know what, I think a great way for me to make a living will be to make furniture and pottery. I think he is in his workshop every day creating the most excellent, like he's just a craftsperson. He's creating excellence every day. So for him, he doesn't want to think about any of the business side of what he's doing. He sells bed frames that are priced at $12,000, and that's a real price because of what goes into them. But his wife is the brains of the operation. And luckily he has her. And so for everyone else, I guess, is the book.
Yeah. I mean, an artist is anybody that does something well, right? So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a photographer or a painter or a graphic designer, or you could be a mechanic. You could be designing custom motorcycles. You could, I mean, it's anything under the sun. And I think even though this is really geared towards what most people would consider like creative people, photographers, graphic designers, any kind of design work, it's really for anybody that's in business. Like, I think you can read this book and there's a takeaway in there that you would be like, oh, wow, this is something that I can apply to my own business, even though I'm not a designer or what have you.
It's really fun for me to hear that. And I have been hearing it because obviously the subtitle of the book kind of like identifies a group of people that are going to benefit from it. But I have had a lot of people tell me, people from outside that group, that I would not have necessarily thought of as creative freelancers, who have told me that they pulled a nugget from it. So it's really great to hear that. And it also makes me think about what else needs to be written.
Yeah. Well, and I totally agree. I think there's a lot of nuggets in it, and it really is cross-platform. You can be an accountant, and because you're a freelance accountant, there's things in here that would make complete sense. And I was pulling stuff. I created a Word document, and I was making bullet points of stuff that I thought was very valuable to take away from. The one thing I want to talk about too is, defining your team. And, when we think of a team, we think of employees and everything. But I like the fact that you even laid out, part of my team is maybe the attorney I hire, the CPA I hire to do my work. And the beautiful thing about hiring those external team members is I only pay them when I need their services, but yet they're part of your team and, on a global level. And a company here in town that does that, they have all these board members and team members, and they treat them like they're employees, but they're not, they don't pay them as employees because they're contractors. But when you go to their website, they lay out their team, and their lawyers on their page, their CPAs on their page. And really the core group of what I would say is the traditional employees, like 3 people. But their team is a lot more than that. And some of them are consultants on museums and stuff like that. And I think that's a good way to like represent yourself, is like, here, when you hire me as a freelancer, you're also hiring this team that I utilize to make my everyday job work. And I really appreciate you laying that out like that, because I don't think most people think that way.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more the norm, but I think you're right. It's, me, even before I had employees, it was just me. Yeah, I had my CPA and my lawyer, and, I'm not a graphic designer. And so anytime there's a million times that I need graphic design done. So I have my go-to person for that. And it just becomes a pretty well-oiled machine. And you can also, you can show up a little more professionally, using the word we.
Yeah.
I touched on that this is obviously a labor of love. You love helping people. I mean, that's just part of your DNA. I can sense that. I feel that. You could just continue to like give these tidbits of information out to people that you care about and that but you decide to write a book, and nobody in this day and age makes money off writing books. But you still felt the desire to do this. Why? Just because it is embedded in your DNA?
I guess the original reason I wrote it was I probably couldn't have articulated the reason. I just needed to get it out. I needed to get it down. But it's a practice for me. Someone said that the clarity of writing is clarity of thought. And so I use that sometimes to assess people, by how they email me. Is this person a clear thinker? Can they be a leader? That kind of thing. But for me, it's just a personal practice. Like for me, writing this book was a way of organizing my own thoughts and my own process. And so it served me to be able to do that. And, if it helps anyone else, that's just a bonus.
So it's almost like a meditation in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when you're in it, you're 100% focused on it. And I would say the process of writing it taught me almost as much as all the learnings that went into it.
Yeah. And then the next step of, if you really want to learn it and understand, is to teach it. So going on a lecture series and teaching your book to different organizations, you'll walk away as a master. Even if you just start off like a layman and like, this is something that interests me, and now I'm diving into it, I write it, and now I'm going to go lecture or teach it. Man, it just explodes as far as your knowledge base and being able to retain it.
Yeah, very true. And that is exciting to me. And I quoted Jim Quick in the book on something else, but another thing Jim Quick says is, when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. And that's totally true. I should also say, when you write something, you get to learn it twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've heard this many times from talking to, various people and artists, for sure. Once they sit down and they start talking about their work, it really makes them stop and think about why they do certain things. Or in some instances, it's made them go, you know what? I haven't thought about that in a while. I want to go back. I want to circle back to that either technique or that series, and really kind of helps, solidify these ideas in their heads because they've actually verbalized it and had an opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah. And I think the process of doing that is also becoming more like democratized. It's not just like a 3-day seminar that you pay a bunch of money for. Now it's like, my friend Angela Fink, who wrote the foreword to the book, she and I are going to do an Instagram live together. I think on April 2nd, where we just break down, like the topic is how to turn your creative passion into a business, by featuring Angela, who has actually done it. And so we'll talk about maybe break down the top 3 kind of takeaways from the book and take questions and stuff like that, which is like a very casual modern day version of the lecture.
And she's a person that you actually mentored.
I would say I was able to help and influence her a little bit. She's one of those people who is immensely talented and creative. And she also does have a great business mind. She just hadn't fully engaged with some of the values that I put into the book. And so I actually showed her an early copy. I was like, she came to me asking, I can't remember what the specific advice was, or she might've been coming to me for a book recommendation, actually. Are there any books on this topic? And I said, well, I have this PDF, like I wrote this thing, it's in a PDF. It'll take you 40 minutes to read. And I just texted it to her. I think her reaction to it was probably one of the things that inspired me to actually go get it published, because it was so, she said her income tripled. And I thought, wow, what if I could triple 1,000 people's income?
Yeah. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a chapter that's called "My Mess is My Message." And I think that's what kind of just gave me that little gut punch. I'm like, gosh, darn it. I've been here. And I think every creative freelancer has experienced this in their freelance life. Talk a little bit about that. I don't want to ruin it and I don't want you to give everything away, but I would like to, you kind of set the tone there. Like, hey, this kind of is where I was at and where I was going.
Yeah, I think we all like to hear stories about just people being vulnerable or people being made a fool of. And I was kind of made a fool of in this kind of one thing that happened to me in my freelance career. So I told the story of that. I just opened the book with that story because it was a major reason why I went on to, it made me decide to get better at these things. And once I got better at them, that was when I wrote them all down. But that was the moment where, yeah, I was made a fool of. And I was like, well, why don't I just tell the story? It'll be interesting to people.
And the basic premise is that you had a client that was trying to burn you, like was not paying up. And that's like one of the worst positions you can be in as a freelancer, because a lot of times freelancers need that money. And when you have a client that's not paying you on time or refuses to pay you, it's a lot of stress and anxiety. And as a person that's been freelancing for over 20 years, in the last year and a half, I had the same exact experience, and with a client that I'd done, a number of jobs before for them, but then all of a sudden I wasn't getting paid, and it was really stressful.
Very stressful. Especially, there were a couple of reasons why this one in particular was stressful for us. One of them was it was a big job, and the other one was, which I explored later, we didn't have much else going on at that moment. And so part of our job as a small studio was to make sure there was other work, diversify enough so that if one client burns you, you're not bankrupt. But the other reason I really wanted to explore that story was to just self audit, like what could I have done differently to set a precedent, maybe at the beginning of the client relationship, so that they wouldn't feel like they could do this, or to understand maybe where the client was coming from. Were they choosing not to pay us? Were they unable to pay us? What was going on? And then also just to have a go-to scripted way to respond when this happens, because it happens to everybody.
And so from there on out, after you set that tone with that experience, you kind of lay out all the essential things that you should do or should put into practice. And you're not telling, we kind of touched on this earlier, you're not telling people exactly how to do it. You're giving them the foundation of what you think needs to be put in place. And then you just have to figure out and skew it yourself to your particular practice or business. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in some cases, I do tell exactly how to do it, but I'll do it from a certain perspective. I'll use a photographer as an example here, and I'll sometimes even script how conversations should go just to make it easy. And, that's why I just put that, instead of trying to describe how you should write a proposal for a job, I just put an example proposal in the book, because it's an important detail, but it's a detail. And, rather than spend a year figuring out how to write the perfect proposal, just put that year into your art and use my template.
There you go. I kind of going with this. You later talk about agreements and expectations, and that's the answer to a lot of them. If you assign a good proposal into a good agreement, and then lay out expectations of like how often you're going to get paid or when the work is going to be due, and then I love what you say is like over deliver early, but lay out those expectations early, and then and I'm jumping here, but then you have a paragraph in there where you're telling them what to say in this situation. And in parentheses, you say smile. So don't let anger and frustration control you. Take a breath and then lay out your script. And then I love the fact that you said smile at the beginning, smile at the end, be pleasant about it, and you're going to be more successful that way.
Yeah. So much of it is just that. What I try to teach is how to say difficult things in an easy way. Because if you just avoid difficult things, then you don't have that's no good. That's no kind of life. So there's things that need to be said that can be said in a way that's respectful. Like, one of the things I really wanted this book to be is a book that a freelancer could read, but also someone who employs freelancers could read and not feel like I'm sitting here giving these tips and tricks and hacks as to get how the freelancer gets the most out of the client. Like, it's not really that. It kind of goes back to the point about negotiation. I don't believe in this negotiation style of bluffing. Like coming into, like, I'm a freelancer, I'm coming into a client conversation. I don't really have my rates figured out. So the amount of money I want is the most I can get, whatever I think the client's budget is. I really feel like that's the wrong approach. The wrong approach is know your rate and ask for it, even if you might be leaving a little money on the table in doing so, because your rate has been established, you're happy with that rate, and it'll grow in the future. The reason I like that is because it's fact-based and it's honest. And it's not like, because I don't think you're going to bluff your way into a great client relationship or into making a good amount of money as a freelancer. I think at the root of all this, of course, is just being really good at it and really delivering a lot of value and really satisfying the client. It's not about tricking the client into paying you more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not this total arbitrary thing based on what you think should happen. You actually can speak from a place of knowledge of what you do and what you bring to the table. And like you said, honesty plays into the whole equation. Like, you got to be honest. People appreciate honesty. And then if you're honest and truthful, there's a passage I think that's biblical that says, if you live in the truth, nothing can hurt you, basically. Mm. And it's a very valid way to live your life. Just being honest, being a good person. I love that and I want to circle back to the whole dialogue the conversation that Wes was talking about, where you insert smile. That is a really important thing that you touched on there. You can get through some very difficult conversations and situations if you can smile, because it's hard to become aggressive or confrontational, either for yourself or the other person. If that person is smiling back to you, smiling at you, you can't really get upset with them. And then on top of that, you throw in the truth and honesty bit, and it's, you're like 99.9% there.
Yeah. It's so true, because a lot of what makes these quote unquote difficult conversations difficult is like, you're thinking like, you're coming into the conversation, you're afraid, they're going to know that I'm bluffing, or they're going to be able to poke a hole in my fee package, or, but if you come into it in total honesty, you can use honesty when you quote your rates. You can use honesty when you negotiate your rates, when you discount your rates. If you decide to do that, you can be honest in all of these situations. And it's so much easier to do than to use the bluffing technique.
Yeah.
Talk about the chapter, Release Your Guilt. Touch on that for us just a little bit, as for freelancers out there, because I think a lot of freelancers live in that place.
Yeah, I've experienced that with friends of mine who have been really talented, but associated a level of guilt or awkwardness with collecting money for their art. And I think that's it's an awkward place to live, because if you're an artist for a living, if you're a creative freelancer, you've kind of already decided that your work is valuable, it's worth something, and you're going to command a certain price for it so that you can earn a living at it. If you've made that decision, then you might as well go all in on that and understand that you're not necessarily compromising your art just because you're accepting money for it, unless you decide to do that. But you can be this artist, this creative freelancer, whatever your vocation is, and you can become the best at it, and you can command premium rates for it, and you can do all of that in good conscience.
Why do you think we do that? Is it a societal thing, do you think? That creatives and artists are made to feel bad about talking money, that it's a taboo thing?
It could be. I mean, it could be that there's a phase that you go through where it's there was a phase I went through in BMX riding where I was like, wait, I'm getting paid to do this? I would have done this anyway. So any amount of money is a gift, which is a good gratefulness mentality to be in, but that could be a part of it. And then I think if you're a freelancer, you are like the kind of the most basic version of an entrepreneur, and you kind of see this distance between you and what you're doing, and then like an employee who perceivably is just getting like a going market rate of a salary. It's just given to them. Like it's like they're entitled to it, where you're over here and you kind of have to ask. But that's just a reality. So I think just getting really good at asking, or better yet, stating the price is the way to get past that.
And that plays back into the whole thing that you lay out later in the book as far as figuring out your price structure and how much money you're worth, and being able to truthfully negotiate with your potential client or your client as far as, hey, this is what this is worth for me to do this, and this is what I bring to the table. Talk about some of the other things that people are going to read about in this book. What other things do you lay out in this book that is helpful for people that are freelancers?
Well, I think one of the top misconceptions of a freelancer is this, or top like thing that creative people tend to get frustrated about, is this idea that we should just be paid on our merits. Like, if I'm extremely talented, I'm really good at what I do, why don't I just get the best price for my work? And nobody, as we know, nobody gets that. So everybody's mad or frustrated. And I think the purpose of the book is to help people understand the game so that they can just avoid that frustration and understand, like, on top of your creative talent, here's everything else that goes into it. And it's a lot, but you only have to focus on these 6 things. So if you can figure these 6 things out, the rest is details. The other misconception, and the other thing I wanted to address in the book, is there are a lot of, like, there's an overwhelming list of things that people think they need to do when they get into freelancing, like coming up with their name and, designing their proposal and invoice and making sure they have their taxes sorted out and a business bank account. And all those things are important. And I kind of tried to lay them out in the book without spending too much time on them, because the most important thing is understanding that you just need to get a client. If most of the fear that we have around freelancing is this certain level of doubt that, like, will there be enough clients? Like, can I actually get a client? And so if you just address that thing first, the rest becomes details, because you have, when I started my first recruiting firm, I had to bill my first couple clients under a made up name, because my business partner at the time was kind of dragging his feet on what our name was going to be. And so I could have easily gotten caught up in, well, we got to figure out this name, and so we can open the bank account, and we're going to look silly if my first client was Adidas. And I was like, Adidas is going to think I'm a hack if they're writing a check to, like, so-and-so consulting services or whatever. And it turns out Adidas didn't care. They just wanted to get their role filled, and they wanted me to do good work for them and do it really quickly and treat them well and service them. And I did that. And also the fact that there was this big check coming that it needed a place to go. I needed to give them a name to make it out to. That was all the motivation I needed to get those details sorted out. But the most important thing I needed to do is just get a client. And once I got, if you can get 1 client, you can get 3 clients. And again, in a lot of these lines of work, 3 clients is enough. Now you have a freelance business.
That's a great point.
And I love that the mindset of laying that out to creatives, that you don't need to have 100 clients. Why not just have 6 really fantastic clients that, continue to give you work? And if you have this foundation of clients, then you're going to be in a much better position than hustling all the time for 100 different clients.
Yeah. And the surprising reality is, if you do a little bit of quick math based on your rates, if you're working most of the time, how much money would you make with 3 clients? And maybe you need 6, maybe it depends on what exactly you do. But when you put some hard numbers around it, you can start to really build your confidence in terms of what is it actually going to take to have a freelance business.
Yeah.
And it might not be as much as you thought.
And I think books like this, and maybe this one in particular, need to be read by people coming out of school or starting out, because I think it's so important that, let me say this. I think a lot of people, when they're first starting out, undervalue themselves. And I've done it, and I continue to do it. And if you do some market research to see what the market is, I think that's beneficial. And I think if you just go in saying, go talk to some people and say, so what do you charge? And maybe, some people will slam the door in your face, but others might take you under the wing and say, well, this is how I develop my my price structure, and this is where I started it at. And, based on now, this is maybe where you could be. But it also helps everybody, because then everybody becomes aware of like, oh, this is what the market will hold. And you're not undercutting people, drastically. I mean, it's fine to be competitive, but I think it's just important to look at, what you want to make, what you think you can make. And like you said, make really scientific, intelligent decisions on pricing structure.
Yeah. And also understanding that there is a spectrum, and that's okay. I remember, and it's also okay to undervalue yourself at the beginning if that's what it takes to teach you, in the process of learning what you are worth. Because again, it's not always, your value isn't always only solely down to your talent. It might also be how you deliver and your level of professionalism. And I remember knowing a photographer whose day rate was $2,000 and knowing another photographer whose day rate was $20,000. And at first I was like, oh, well, this other one's getting severely underpaid now that I know the $20,000 a day is possible. But then I had to kind of look at, why is this person getting $20,000 a day? And, but yes, I think exposure to those numbers is key, because it just starts to change your mentality. Like a photographer who's getting $2,000 a day should be inspired to know that there's another photographer out there getting $20,000 a day, because now you know what's possible if you step your game up.
Yeah.
Makes total sense. And you know what? Wes brought up a thought in my head, in that we talk to people all the time, artists that, have gone to have a formal art education. The one thing that we hear consistently is that they have this great foundation on how to do their art or their craft, yet these art schools set these kids up for failure. They graduate with a ton of, student loans and debt, but they don't really get taught the business side of things. I could see your book as, I could see it as a textbook in schools and colleges that lay out how you go about having, a freelance art life. I mean, it is so well laid out. I could see it as a textbook. Have you thought about that at all?
A little bit, yeah. I thought about it with, just reflecting back on my experience guest lecturing, because actually when I guest lectured at design school, it was a class for fashion design students, but it was called the business of fashion. So they were learning all of these other things that they hadn't yet learned by becoming a good designer. But also I got to take a class at Art Center here in LA. It was being taught by one of my mentors, who was basically speaking on the same topic. And it's where a lot of this material came from too. So yeah, it would be wonderful to get material like this. I mean, I just saw the need for it when I was in there, sitting next to these really talented kids who just had a lot of questions about this other stuff, everything they hadn't learned yet.
Yeah. That's cool that they actually had a class though, because sometimes you don't really get much in the way of classes, period, when you're in art school.
Yeah, there should be a class about this. There should be a class on compound interest, and a class on not going into too much debt.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all the topics that college age kids don't want to hear, so they probably wouldn't attend, and they just have to learn it the hard way, like I did.
But that's a hard way to go too. The school of hard knocks and the trial and error. I mean, like I just said, I had one of these situations as far as getting paid from a client that you spelled out, immediately in your book. You're talking about fantasizing about being Ray Donovan and being a fixer. And trust me, I've gone through those same scenarios in my head. I'm like, all right, how am I going to get my money?
Mm-hmm.
I want my money, and how do I do it without going to jail? So I don't think I'd fare well. I might be able to pull off the orange, but I'm a pretty small dude, and I don't think I'd do well in jail. So how do I go about being professional and communicating my needs and what my expectations are to my clients? And, speaking, like I said, as a freelancer and, with 20 plus years experience, still running up against that, it was refreshing and eye-opening to see what you've laid down in this book. I love how you laid out a price structure, because I think a lot of times freelancers set themselves up for failure, right? So demanding some money up front so that your client has buy-in to the project, I think is so incredibly smart. And it totally made me rethink about how I do things and how I'm going to do things in the future.
Yeah, and I think that might not necessarily work for every type of freelance work, but it's a valid concept where you say, what I always tell my clients, like the moment you say go, I'm diving in. So we do need to eliminate any possibility where I dive in 24/7 for the next 2 weeks and then don't get paid. So here's how we set up the pricing structure. And they're very amenable to that because they're going to see instant value. They're going to, in most, again, it depends on what you do for a living, but like, let's say you are delivering a design project in 3 phases. Well, by the time you get to the first phase, they're going to see some pretty exciting work that you've already done. And they're going to see where their money's going. So anytime you can correlate payment with deliverables is a good thing on both sides.
The industry that we work in, it's so different than other industries. Like if you have a plumbing problem at your house today, you're going to call a plumber, right? Like if it's not something you can fix yourself, you're going to find somebody that can fix your problem for you. You're a problem fixer. And at the end, that guy is going to fix your problem, but before he leaves, he's going to expect payment. It's one of the few industries where we don't get paid when the job is completed a lot of times, right? But you set up a structure in this book that enables you to feel good about what's going on and protects yourself.
Yeah, and it's just a value system of, it's a partnership. You're a freelance creative and your client is your partner. And there are things that are expected of them so that you can do your job properly. And they should know about those things up front so you're not throwing any surprises their way. And you should just kind of lay out, hey, here's how this is going to go. And they want to hear that. They want to know that they're in the hands of a professional. And if there's some upfront payment or some payment stages throughout the project, if it's a longer project, then you explain why that is and you show them what they're going to get in exchange. And I think just upfront communication is really key in all of these situations.
Yeah.
And you lay it out by showing people how they can write a good scope of work, how to write a proposal, and how to protect yourself with a contract that's not so legally daunting that your client goes, you know what, I can't even wrap my head around this, and I don't think I want to work with you. How to be clear and concise. Once again, streamlining the process so that the communication is readily digested.
Yeah, you just want to make it easy. That's what they want. They want it to be as easy as possible. They don't want to rip you off. They just want it to be easy. And so you can make it easy. And a lot of that is through your creative talent, and all of that. A lot of it is also through your process.
Yeah. One thing I think I've never really thought much about is when you're negotiating a price and you're a little higher than they want to pay, instead of walking away from the job, you're saying, well, let's look at the scope of the work and what can I tail back and give you a product that you want. And I still, am being compensated for the work I'm putting in. And I don't know if I've really thought that much about that. It's always like, you get it or you don't kind of thing. But I really appreciate the fact that you're like, let's negotiate here. We got room.
Yeah. And it's fact-based, right? It's like, here's a whole list of the things that we've agreed you're going to get out of this. And here's a whole list of the things that I do offer, but you've decided you don't need. So we can interchange things from one list to the other, and that affects price. And then they kind of see what makes the price go up and down. And that's just being honest and showing visibility. One of the biggest things I think freelancers come across that's challenging is they agree to a price and a certain amount of work, and they leave it at that. When they do the amount of work that they thought was expected, they want to get their price, but the client now wants more work. And you haven't really discussed what happens in that situation. So it's like, do you put a time limit on it? Do you list the deliverables, or what do you do? There has to be otherwise your only other option is to keep working until the client's satisfied. And who knows when that could be.
Right. Maybe never.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in like the construction industry, you come in and you're like, oh, I want to change this. Well, okay, we'll do that. But there's a change order, and here's our agreement now based on your changes. So it's similar to that.
Totally. Yeah. Change order. And it could be as simple as one little sentence in the proposal. You don't really have to have any fine print. You just say, hey, like in the event of this, here's what happens. Or, hey, client, it's important to you to have this done in a timely manner. Okay, we can commit to this time frame, but we need you to commit to this turnaround on feedback. So when I show you something within 2 business days, I need your feedback. And just simple agreements that you're creating. And the psychology of an agreement versus an expectation is really interesting, because human beings don't want to go back on their own word. So if you can involve the client in settling on the agreement, okay, here's what we're going to do. Yes. That's so much better than just expecting that they're probably going to pay you towards the end of the project, maybe.
Yeah.
I like how you spelled out like all the different ways of going about pricing, and how you talk about everything from adding on these fees to late fees, the idea behind it and how to go about it. Travel fees, which I think is a really important thing that people don't think about. And a lot of times I leave money on the table. Like, time is money, and you should be compensated for the day that you take away from either your other clients or your normal work routine in order to travel somewhere to do the job that's expected with this current client. Speak a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, I just think it's important, because like, you're not trying to milk the client for extra money by doing that, right? You're making it so everyone kind of thinks twice. Like, is this travel really necessary? Is the travel is necessary? Okay, great. I'm going to go on this trip, and I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to deliver the deliverables, but it's going to take me away from other client work. So we just have to adjust price accordingly and just give visibility to all that. Expenses, a lot of it's just super easy traditional stuff that if you work for an ad agency, it would be normal. But maybe if you're a creative freelancer, you haven't incorporated that level of professionalism yet, and it's pretty easy to do that.
Yeah.
And then you have a chapter that's just entitled "Doing the Job," and I thought there were some interesting things, especially for myself in there. I'm really bad at routine. I'm really bad about, I have to-do lists, but that's about the extent of it. So I love how you set yourself up for success by thinking about all these things, cleaning up your space. Like, that's, it totally messes with you when your space that you're trying to create in is completely chaotic. Do you feel the same way? Like, do you always have to have like this, obviously I get the sense from what you've talked about as far as design and aesthetic and streamlining things. I imagine that your house is pretty immaculate.
I do my very best. It does come from this place of, it's 2 things. It's number one, like it's very difficult to feel focused in a cluttered environment. But I also have the added bonus of being just very aesthetically attracted to, I have an Instagram handle called Easy on the Extras, which is a sort of life reminder that cutting out things that get in the way of your goal is not only productive, but aesthetically pleasing. And so I used to think like, hey, I'm not going to impose my aesthetics on anyone else. I'm not going to tell people how their offices should look. But then the more creative people I met, the more I realized like I never met a single one who was thriving it and crushing it every day in a chaotic environment. I was really into that book, not Thinking Fast and Slow, but the Undoing Project, where they talk about Amos Tversky was this brilliant guy he said something like, if you're not kicking yourself for throwing something away at least once a month, then you're not throwing enough away. And he's like, this guy's a genius and amazing scientist. And so I kind of said, you know what, I'm just going to embrace that because I felt legitimized by him saying it.
Yeah, minimalism is kind of a key word this nowadays too. Obviously, because of the two gentlemen whose name, Nicodemus and I can't remember the other guy's name, the minimalists that basically said they had Nicodemus had a packing party. Everybody came and packed up all his stuff, and then for the next 30 days, he only unpacked what he needed, and then he gave or sold or threw away the rest. I thought that it's a little extreme, but you basically say like, your subchapters is like scale down, organize what's left, and embrace it. And I love that. I like this idea. You go first. Oh, I was just going to say, I need to throw more stuff away. So go ahead. Sorry.
I like this idea of equating your level of organization with your level of self-respect. So it's like, I kind of I have this thought, like, if you're not sure how organized you should get or how far you should take this, just ask yourself, how much do I respect you? Or how productive do I want to be? How well do I want to deliver and shoot for the highest possible? But I love this story. James Altucher tells this story about when he sold all his possessions and he had this apartment in New York. He was traveling and he got this idea that by the time he went home, he wanted it to all be gone. And so he called a friend and said, go clean out my apartment. You can throw it away. You can give it away. You can sell it, whatever. If you sell it, you keep all the money. The only rule is don't call me. Don't ask me, should I keep this or that? Get rid of everything. And it has to be empty when I get back. And I think she called him when it was done. And then he called his landlord and terminated the lease and, lived in Airbnbs for the next 3 years or whatever it was. I love these extreme stories because like how liberating must that be? Of course there's sacrifice, like there's family heirlooms, there's whatever, things are going away. But like the most frustrating and silly thing for me is I've moved a lot. And when I move and I realize like, oh, this is the third time I've moved this thing without unpacking it or without using it in between. And because I thought it was important to me. And so at that point, I'm like, well, I'll just take a picture of it and give it away.
There you go. I love it.
I love that concept. So my parents are at a stage where they're trying to get rid of stuff all the time. So I constantly am getting new things brought to my house. And fortunately, my mom can't figure out how to get this podcast, so she won't know. But she always brings me like a bag or box of stuff. And I'm like, I look at my wife and I'm like, what are we going to do with this? I'm like, I don't have any emotional attachment to this. Do you want any of this stuff? Because I don't think we need any more stuff in our house. In fact, there's other stuff that needs to go. So a lot of times it just leaves the house in a box for the thrift store.
Yeah, similar situation with my parents. My mom is a meticulous organizer, but she keeps everything. And so she lives in the Midwest where space is plentiful and her entire attic can be dedicated to her collection of heirlooms. And so that was really nice. What she got to do when I had a baby was send me things from my childhood. She's, sending me these toys that I played with as a baby for our kid. But anytime she sends me a text of a photo like, hey, would you like this whole box of things? I could ship it to you. I just have to ask her, like, if there's anything in there that's a family heirloom to you, don't send it. Because when I'm done with something, when my kid grows out of something, we instantly give it away. We try our hardest. We're not perfect at this, but we try our hardest to just adhere to the 1 in, 1 out rule. Like if something comes in, something else has to go out. Because I don't have an attic, so if I did, I wouldn't want it to turn into a store. It would just feel so stressful. I would feel like, well, next time I move, I'm gonna have to go through it all.
Right.
This is hello, my name's Todd. This is my museum of tchotchkes that I've acquired over the years from my Midwestern parents.
Well, what's Marie Kondo? If it makes you happy, if it gives you joy, you can keep it.
Yep.
Exactly.
So no judgment. No judgment.
I love it. She'll hold it up. Does this give me joy? Like, get rid of it.
Yeah.
My wife and I totally did that like before the pandemic, like a little over a year ago. And it was very freeing. So I love that. I love the fact that you talk about just being professional and how to meet deadlines. And if you need to, you sprinkle these real life stories throughout the book, which is phenomenal. I think anytime that you share like a real life experience or some kind of connection to an experience, it's really important because it resonates with people. But, setting alerts. And if you need to, if you have a problem meeting a deadline, then kind of trick your brain into an earlier date so that you deliver on time or early.
Yeah.
That's a really important thing, don't you? I mean, obviously you have it in the book, but I mean, being a professional, that could make or break you.
Yeah. And the hardest thing is realizing that it applies to you. It's easy to pad a calendar for a client, but when you have to look at yourself and say, you know what, I'm probably not going to deliver this project on time unless I do this. So I'm going to take the time to sit here. It's going to take me 2.5 minutes, and I'm going to set all the calendar reminders through every stage of this project so that I get it done. I get it done a week early, and then I can release it. Like we were talking about this before, like the mind is for having ideas, not holding them. If you're a creative person, you get to dump that out of your brain, put it in your calendar. You don't need to be thinking about delivery dates. Let your calendar take care of that.
And one last thing I want to talk about, client relationships, the happy client, and when to fire a client. I think if you're doing all these things that you spell out in the book, it's easy to have a happy client. But you're gonna run up into these situations sometimes where you may have to actually fire a client. Speak a little bit about that, if you would.
You're right. I think it's unavoidable, even if you're the best freelancer in the world and the most friendly or whatever, you're still gonna every once in a while come up against a client who is maybe just not the right fit for you. And I think to our earlier point about smiling, I think even that should be done with a smile. And it doesn't have to be, hey, you're a terrible client, I'm out of here. It can be, hey, let me recommend someone who might be a better fit for you. Or maybe you don't do that. Maybe you just say, I don't think this is the right fit. I'm going to give you everything I promised you. I'm going to complete this project, but I'm not going to be able to take on another one. And it's really empowering to be able to do that. This is like one of the great benefits you get to experience as a freelancer. Maybe something you can't. It's a little more difficult to do that as an employee. Like, hey, boss, I don't think this is the right fit. I'm not going to do any of these things for you anymore.
Right. I'm going to recommend my cubicle mate over down the hall here. He'll be able to do it for you.
Exactly. He'll do a better job of it, all of that. No, you don't get that privilege as an employee. So like you get it as a freelancer. So take advantage of it and be sparing about it, of course, and be careful and always, I've had clients that I've made a decision not to work with, or maybe they made a decision not to work with me. Maybe they couldn't afford the price, whatever it was, who have reemerged later in my professional life by recommending someone to me or making an introduction or whatever. It's crazy how that will happen. You can't control everything and you can't make everybody like you forever, but you can do what's in your power to make sure that relationships remain professional, even if they don't continue as a client.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the fact, because I've lost clients and you just don't know why you've lost them. But I like the fact, if you don't want to use my services anymore, call me. And you say that. Don't send a text. Don't ghost them. Don't send an email. Pick up the phone and call them is the best way to do it, because you can have a dialogue about it and hopefully, like you said, end a relationship on good terms that may come back another time, or like you said, lead to other relationships. So I really appreciate that fact.
Yeah. You're always going to you're always going to every once in a while find yourself in a sticky situation. And that's where you really show your character and again, like my rule of thumb is if you're considering putting it into writing, know that it's going to A, be misinterpreted and B, forwarded. So if it's sensitive or if there's potential for that, pick up the phone and show your character.
Yeah.
I love that you, exactly. I love that you addressed that in your book. And that was one of the points I wanted to talk about, that you say that everybody, just consider everybody's an 8-year-old. And I thought that was really, not only is it amusing, but it's totally right on the money. It's like, email and text and anything else. I mean, we live in this age where there's so many different ways to communicate, yet the ball gets dropped, things slip through the cracks. And sometimes the best way to address a situation is to pick up the phone and have an actual conversation with somebody. So I'm glad you addressed that in the book. Anything else?
One other thing kind of on that, on the receiving end, when you have to deliver bad news, here's what I go through. A lot of my clients live locally, so I'm in their face, right? And the whole drive over, I'm thinking, oh God, this is going to be horrible. They're going to yell at me, but I got to do this. And I'm hating my life. I get there, I tell them what happened. They're like, oh, okay. So I've had this dialogue in my brain going back and forth, and how I was just going to get my butt chewed, and then it's nothing. So, a lot of times 90% of the things we worry about never come to fruition, but just have that meaningful conversation, be polite, be respectful. And, I would say 90% of the time it's going to end up okay.
So true. You make such a great point. The way to think about it is, I'm headed towards a difficult conversation. There's only 2 outcomes that are possible, and both of them are good. One of them is like you said, 90% of the time, they just take it way better than you think they will. And the other one is, well, maybe it is difficult, but then it's over.
Right.
And that's better than, letting something linger or hoping that a problem will work itself out when it won't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ignoring the situation is not a solution.
Mm-mm.
And I've done that too.
I think a lot of creative people, that's the world that they live in, and creative avoidance is not your friend. Anything else that you want to talk about in your book, Art for Money, or any tips that you want to pass along to freelancers that they should be thinking about?
I would encourage people. I love to hear people's takeaways. So the best way to get a hold of me is on Instagram at Easy on the Extras. And I get so many wonderful DMs every day from people who have read it and have offered feedback, or have said, hey, this thing really helped me, or told the story. And I love to connect with people that way. So reach out.
The other thing I really appreciate about the book is at the very end, your reading list. I'm always asking people what they read. And I recognize a lot of these titles. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, a phenomenal book. Another guy I really like, Robert Greene, The Law of Human Nature. I've watched a number of YouTube videos about his different books. I've not dived into him because, unlike your book, his is pretty dense and not easy to read. But
it's so true.
Oh my God. And his research method, how he uses a card catalog, and how he writes his book and does all these little card like 3x5 or 4x6 cards maybe. And it's amazing. So if you're interested in wanting to learn how to research another book, Robert Greene is the guy to go to. And he's got a couple, and there's another guy that was his protege that talked about his organization on writing a book, and great stuff. But his stuff is, it's pretty intense.
I mean, I've been halfway through The Laws of Human Nature for the last 2 months. It's just, I might be 2/3 through now, but yeah, it's a lot. I love every page of it, but it is sometimes, but that's the other thing about a long book is, even though I know that book is great and I'm experiencing how great it is, if I just have 10 minutes to sit down and read, I might not pick that one because I know I'll only get through a page or two. And, so is it true? Do you know if it's true that for every book he writes, he reads 200 books? I've heard that.
I think that's true. I think there's something like that. I guess I can't verify that, but I've heard that too. Yeah. I mean, he's a researcher. I mean, that's really what, at the very depth of it. And he looks at all, like The Art of Seduction, another book of his, thick, about the same thing, and just researches the heck out of everything. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then, on the complete flip side of that, The War of Art inspired me a lot in the style of writing this book, because I loved how he's kind of yelling at you a little bit, but the chapter, like some chapters are 1 page long. So it's like a self-help book that's also a page turner in a way. And that was what made me want to keep my book really short, and also keep the chapters themselves. Like, I'd rather have a lot of chapters that are really short, so you can really be able to finish one and digest it.
Yeah. But I really do appreciate your reading list. So thanks for including that at the end.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I'm glad you like it. That was like, I had to narrow it to maybe the top 10 that would be relevant maybe to this audience, but I could talk about books all day long.
Yeah.
As you guys are sitting here talking, I want to adjust one more thing. You strike me as a routine guy. Do you have a set routine for your daily life and then for your week in general?
I've gone through all different phases of routines and testing different routines, and working out in the morning, working out in the midday, whatever. I used to get up at 5 and be at the gym at 6. There's some good and bad outcomes of that kind of routine. I have boiled it down to something really simple now. On a work day, I get up at 5:30. I have my office downstairs set up and ready for me. My cold brew is in the fridge, and my clothes are laid out, and my list of priorities is already set from the night before, because I know I only have about 45 minutes until my 2-year-old wakes up. So those will be the most productive 45 minutes of my day. I think the rest of the day is calendarized by my team and the calls that I have to take and all of that. It kind of solves itself. I try to stick to certain rules. If it's a meet and greet, it's in the afternoon. If it's more social / professional, it's in the afternoon or evening. If it's super important, in the morning. Always tackle the hardest task first, or the most important task first, those kinds of things. But I do find that if I just simplify it down to how I spend the first 45 minutes of the day, then the rest is a lot easier. And routines can be overwhelming if you overdo it on I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you have a routine that is really intense?
No, I have a routine because I have to, because I work for somebody else. So that kind of sets my routine. I do have certain things that I'm pretty routined about. What I eat, like breakfast, 1 egg and toast, pretty much every morning. So I don't have to think about it. And it was easy because at one time I was tracking calories, so it was easy to write down my calories because I knew what it was. The other thing that I kind of live by most of the time, not always, if I have to do something like I don't want to do, I do it first. So, if you're going to have to eat a frog, eat it for breakfast kind of thing. And so there's that kind of deal. And then the worst thing in the world is I'm ruled by my email, and I hate it. And there was a time where I checked my email at like 10, 2, and at the end of the day, but in this current position, that's out the window. Everything's emergency, and I react as such. Everything is an emergency, so I'm always putting out fires, and I hate it, and I need to change it. But there you go. Todd, what do you got?
I can't say that I'm a routine guy. I'm very much just kind of go with the flow, which I think hurts me in a lot of ways. My biggest routine is my to-do list. I try to prioritize like what needs to get done for the week. And so I've tried to distill it down to like 3 things that I just definitely want to accomplish for that particular day. And then if anything else gets accomplished beyond that, then that's just kind of gravy. And then whatever doesn't get accomplished gets put on the list for the next day. And then I prioritize that again. So,
yeah, that's good.
I heard a really interesting concept recently that you should, instead of managing your time, you should manage your energy. And I was thinking about that because like I've started to focus the parts of my day that are routine is that first 45 minutes. And then my days are so intense now, enjoyably intense, but crazy. So by 6 or 7 p.m., whenever I hang it up, I almost kind of go through another ritual where I like shower again and change into a monochromatic sweatsuit and have like happy hour with my wife. And there's something sort of something relaxing about that routine that helps me kind of like get my head out of the workspace. But it's hard to control. Yeah, like you say, Wes, like in between the actual work hours, it's hard to control that routine. But I do notice that if I think about, it's not really about how chaotic the day gets. It's about how good I feel in my ability to respond to it. So, and that's kind of like my energy. So it's like getting enough sleep, eating right. If I can do those things and if I can be excited about my work, then it's really much less about what craziness occurs during the day. I mean, crazy things happen during my day. I feel like it's the same with everyone. And if I can, I don't blame it on those things. It's because usually when something crazy happens, it's how bad it is depends on how ready I am for it and what my energy levels are like.
Yeah. I've never heard that phrase before. You manage your energy and not your time. I'm going to have to wrap my head around that. That's an interesting way to look at things.
I love how you have that separation between your work life and then, your family life. And I think that's like a really important thing for people to be able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, throughout the pandemic, there was a really long period where we couldn't have any help, nanny or anything like that. So my wife and I just kind of set it up and made commitments where, 6 p.m. It's really hard for me to quit work every day at 6 p.m. There's a lot to be done. There's not just a lot to be doing, but it's all very exciting and I want to do it. So to pull myself away from it at 6 p.m., but that became a necessity because that was bath time and my daughter had been with my wife all day. And so guardrails are just super helpful. I did notice when I started to set that time, that 6 p.m. time, my last hour or two of the day started to get really productive because around 4 p.m. I started to really think about, well, if I'm going to get it done, it has to get done before 6. And so that's really helpful.
Man, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today and talking about Art for Money. To our listeners, again, it's through Holloway Publishing. It's called Art for Money, Up Your Freelance Game and Get Paid What You're Worth. Where can people go to purchase this book, Michael?
For digital version, holloway.com/artformoney. And Holloway has a really beautiful proprietary reader that makes it really easy to read the book digitally, as well as participate with all the added features of the book. For a hard copy, you can find it on Amazon.
Fantastic. And what's the cost of the book?
For reasons of their own choosing, Amazon has lowered it to $12.99, I think, for the time being. So I don't know when that ends, but I think the regular price is $18 and maybe $24 for the hardcover.
So if you're listening and you liked what you heard, I highly suggest getting this book. If you're a freelancer, you're creative of any sort, even if you're just a small business person, purchase this book, Art for Money, at $12.99. If that's what it is on Amazon right now, that's a complete steal. So well worth the money. Buy it for yourself, buy it for your friends, and show Michael some love and support. And we look forward to seeing what you do in the future with some of these other book ideas that you have.
I'm excited. We'll come on again and I'll bring some professional headphones next time.
Well, we appreciate your time. And, I'm like Todd said, when your next book comes out, make sure you get a hold of us and we'll love to have you on again, because this has been a great couple hours of just talking to you and learning things. So it's always good.
I'll do that. Thank you guys so much.
Well, for the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.